Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're talking about some more Moon Knight. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today I wanted to talk about some more Moon Knight. As Moon Knight on Disney Plus is over, I figured, you know what, I have one more Moon Knight trade to read. Let's pick up this bad boy right here. So, what this is basically Charlie Huston and David Finch's run on Moon Knight. This is the first 12 issues, I think, plus an annual, although it says Moon Knight number 13, so we'll go with that. Anyway, first year or so of Charlie Huston on Moon Knight. After this, I think he stays on for a couple more issues, and then Mike Benson takes over the book, and Miko Suyan and David Finch have left the book, and I think Javier Salterra's, Mark Texiera, those guys jump on the book and take it over for the next 15 issues or so. So this is a series back from 2006. So this is basically Charlie Huston's initial arc, right? It's 13 issues long. There's a complete ending, that sort of thing. But this is a UK version of their, that's why it says omnibus. It's not the hardcover omnibus. This is from Panini Press. I got this on Amazon. I did an overview of it. It's up on the channel. But this was a really nice way to read this stuff because, unfortunately, this stuff is not in print. Like, this was not one of the things of the many Moon Knight stuff we got this year. We got Bendis Moon Knight. Whoever wanted that? Nobody. No real Moon Knight fan probably wanted that. I thought it was okay. We got the Jeff Lemire run collected all in one thing, and that 12 issues. We got Moon Knight Legacy from Max Bemis collected, that whole 12-issue run. You know, we didn't get this, and we didn't get the Warren Ellis run that's like, I think it's 20 issues long. I mean, he only does the first 6. There's a new writer each arc. Brian Wood comes on. After that, that's not collected because of all the issues with Warren Ellis, probably, in his, I don't know, grooming standards, one would say. So it's kind of weird that this is the thing that launched Moon Knight. This run right here with David Finch is the thing that launched Moon Knight back into the public consciousness, at least in terms of comic readers. Like, we hadn't really heard of, at least people my age had not really heard of Moon Knight until this run started. Yeah, he was in the West Coast Avengers, I think in the 80s or 90s. He had his own series with Doug Mensch and Bill Sienkiewicz in the 80s. But he wasn't really a character that was like noticeable or thought of other than older readers who I was listening to, like Comic Geek Speak at the time, and Kevin Moyer is a huge Moon Knight fan. He loved that original 80s series, so he talked about it incessantly. And I was like, I don't know who this Moon Knight is. I mean, I see the pictures, but there's no modern version of Moon Knight, or there's no modern take on Moon Knight up until this book comes out in 2006. So at the time, this book was a big fucking deal. I remember reading Wizard Magazine at the time, and that, you know, David Finch at the time was the hottest artist Marvel had. He was on New Avengers with Bendis. He did, where's my New Avengers stuff? It's back behind my back here. Right here, these complete collections. He launched that with Bendis. He did Avengers Disassembled up above my shoulder. He was on fire, and so he left New Avengers. Yeah, he was on. He did, like, I think he did the first 6 issues there. He left for an arc. I want to say he came back a little bit later on with Echo and all that stuff. But basically, he took a break from New Avengers, did the Echo stuff, and then leaves entirely and goes to Moon Knight. And you're like, wait, this guy's drawing the premier book at Marvel at the time, and he leaves to go do Moon Knight? This is fucking crazy. And so everybody was like, all right, what is this book? Readers like myself who had never heard of Moon Knight or never really read a Moon Knight story were like, all right, if this is where David Finch is going, I want to know what this character is and what's going on with him. So that's what this book did for the Moon Knight character. It brought him into the modern comic book consciousness for readers like me, born in the mid-'80s, early 80s, whatever, who hadn't read a Moon Knight book or hadn't read a bunch of Moon Knight stories and things like that, because at the time there was no thing like the Marvel Epic Collections. I think we had Marvel Essentials, and I'm not sure if there was a black and white Marvel Essential of Moon Knight at the time, but this is what launched Moon Knight back into our mindset. So when this book comes out, you've got everybody reading it because the #1 artist is drawing it. It's phenomenal. Charlie Huston was a novelist, or is a novelist, but he was coming over. He was one of these like first wave of novelists to come over and start writing comic books. You had Charlie Huston, you had Brad Meltzer, you had Jodi Picoult, you know, shortly thereafter. All these like big time novelists started to come over and write comic books. So this is like on the crest of that first wave of the novelist boom, I guess you could call it. So this is interesting. So what this book is really, it's a love letter to all of those older fans who loved the Doug Munch and Bill Sienkiewicz run on Moon Knight, because it introduces all these older characters whom have not been seen in a while, or reintroduces the modern audience to the Moon Knight stable of characters without being too preachy. It's like we're going to pick up where Moon Knight left off, and we're going to explain his absence by the backstory here in the book. So remember, we were talking about in my review for Jeff Lemire's run, I was like, well, we don't meet these characters in the asylum, but we know they're Moon Knight's friends. People like Crawley, the lady who owns the diner, his girlfriend Marlene, all that stuff. They were people that we were rescuing in that story, and it's here in this story that it's like, oh, these are his friends, these are people he was associated with, things like that. And there is a lot of history that this is drawing upon that I feel like you might benefit from if you read this and then went back and read those older Moon Knight books. So if you're looking at the Marvel Essentials, the 3 of those that have come out, or the Essentials, is it the Epics, the Marvel Epics? 3 of those have come out. That's probably stuff in there. I have not read those, so I can't speak to it, but that's my assumption anyway. Maybe the Fist of Khonshu. Like, there's a bunch of Moon Knight omnis out, and I think the Charlie Huston one is coming out fairly soon. But I know there's at least 2 classic Moon Knight omnibuses out that capture everything that's been published so far up until this run starts. So I think all that stuff is back there. But this is probably a love letter to those kids who read Moon Knight in the 80s and just wanted to see their hero back. But so you have all these returning characters. You have Crawley, you have the I don't even remember her name, the black lady who owns the diner. Her son, apparently one of her other sons worked with Moon Knight and got killed. All this stuff is coming back as Mark Spector is like bringing himself back to life, so to speak, from the undead hellhole he's been wasting in, figuratively, not literally, to become a hero again. So the first 6 issues I really liked. Is this arc called The Bottom, and that is really, I feel like it was a take for modern audiences, people like myself, to jump into the character and not have any of this backstory introduced. I know I just talked a whole bunch about characters that were coming back from old runs, and those characters don't appear until like issue 7 of this book. There's a few of them in the first 6 issues, like Marlene, Frenchie, Jean-Pierre, and who's the other guy? Crawley. But they're not like hashing out things that happened that you feel like you need to read, right? So it's only in issue number 7 that all that stuff happens. But this first arc, The Bottom, is all David Finch drawn. He does the first, I think, 8 issues in this series, and it is some phenomenal stuff. This is Finch at the top of his game before he started inking himself, before he got a little bit more like heavier on the pen with his inks. I feel like some of his stuff now is also a little bit more cartoony than it used to be. He's got a little bit more edge to his faces and things in his modern style that I don't see in the New Avengers stuff. Like this, his modern stuff looks like Forever Evil does, right? So if you look at Forever Evil, that miniseries, and then you look at this, there's clearly a difference in David Finch, because I think he's inking himself on that one, and he's a little bit more cartoony. Like his style is evolving, whereas here he is clearly doing the super realism that inspired him, like Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, all those guys from the 90s artists. So that part is really fun to read. So it's pretty much his new Avengers style, his Avengers Disassembled style, if you remember that. I think, who is inking him? I think Matt Banning or Danny Mickey. Yeah, Danny Mickey's doing the inks on this run in particular. But the first 6 issues kind of tell you who Mark Spector is. They establish that he's a mercenary, and he was a superhero, and then he kind of like got down on his luck and you discover that all this stuff that made him go down on his luck is the doing of this group called the Collective. And there's not really any reason for their existence. They're kind of introduced and done away with in the 6 issues. They're not a larger thing like Marvel's Hydra or Cobra or anything else like that. They're just here, a group of people who don't like Moon Knight and have basically, you find out that they've set him up to fall down this rabbit hole of just death, not death, but destruction, despair, loathing, isolation, all that stuff, to where he's no longer Moon Knight when you meet him. Like, the first issue is this flashback to like his last adventure as Moon Knight, where he's going up against Bushman, has a huge fall, breaks his legs, it's really bad, and then you kind of discover that he's no longer Moon Knight anymore after you've read this action sequence. It was a really cool framing device that I remember reading back in the day and being like, wow, this is special, this is different. And then as the series progresses, you have what I'll call bearded Mark Spector coming back to life, so to speak, standing up on his legs. His legs are healed. He didn't do any like PT, so it's a pain to walk. So there's a gag later in the second arc where his knees are popping on every page because he didn't do any physical therapy. But it's him deciding to become Moon Knight again. He puts on the suit, he puts on a bunch of armor, and goes and beats these Collective guys coming out. Khonshu's also here. He's not here in the form of the Bird like he was in the Warren Ellis run, and kind of has been since then, especially on the Disney Plus show. Here he is Bushman. He's this guy right here. And Bushman was apparently this villain that, he's involved with the origin of Moon Knight, Mark Spector, and he's this guy that we find out went up against Moon Knight in his last adventure that's shown in the first issue or 2 here. And he rips off, Moon Knight cuts off his face. So basically, once Khonshu decides to tease Mark by appearing as Bushman, he decides to do it without his face on half the time. So think like Joker in Death of the Family, where they cut off Joker's face in Detective Comics #1 in the New 52, and then Joker was wearing his face as his own mask. Just take that off, and it's just the muscle and stuff, and that's what Bushman / Khonshu is in this book. And Khonshu's a fucking dick in this book. He is so rude to Mark. He is not the benevolent god of the moon like he is in the Disney Plus show. He has bloodlust. Khonshu has bloodlust. He's like, I'm the god of vengeance, and you will praise me by beating the crap out of those people or going and killing them. The more blood, the better. And if you give me blood, I will give you glories. And the glories are the friendships, the power, all that kind of stuff that Moon Knight, Mark Spector used to have. So it's a really interesting, like, gritty take. I mean, this whole book is violent, nasty, and gross, and very gritty. But it's this gritty take that is completely removed from what Moon Knight is on Disney Plus, right? This is really an R-rated book without being R-rated, I would say, in terms of the violence and gore and just the themes of the depression and self-loathing and all that stuff. Like, you see like a rating on a movie nowadays that says like adult situations. That's this book right here, plus some gore, plus some violence, and some bloodlust. So really, really cool story. You got Taskmaster in here, who's probably being very funny. In the second arc has to do with this guy called the Midnight Sun. And there's some backstory here where they're like, this guy is the son of an older villain who's taken up his father's mantle. He's somehow supposed to be dead, but he's also a robot. And there's this other robot nurse that's like building him back together. There's some very lewd conversations between the two of them, which probably wouldn't fly in modern comic books today. Remember, this was 2006, not 2022. And ultimately ends with Moon Knight kind of offing both of these two characters and putting them out of their misery, which I think was the point all along. That became a little unclear as that arc progressed. Like, we kind of do away with the flashbacks at the end of the first arc, and then we're moving forward and we're making amends and we're meeting all these other new characters. And then the last 2 issues, for some reason, Charlie Huston decides to do a series of like intercutting of scenes the way that Tom King does now, that at least they're on the same page. Tom King, what he's doing in Bat and Cat now with Clayman I think is pretty bad. because he's intercutting between scenes and timelines on the same page, where at least we're getting a few pages of one scene, a few pages of another, and the cut is the page turn as opposed to the panel border, which is, I prefer. If you're going to do intercutting of scenes, at least give me a page to make that page turn to go to something else, because everybody knows how to do that, right? But you have Miko Suyan on the last 4 or 5 issues here in this book, and he does a pretty good approximation of the style that you were used to with David Finch. Like, at first, I bet you could look at a Miko Suyan page and be fooled and be like, wow, this is a different look for Finch, but it's not. It's a different artist completely. But they do share a lot of the same similarities, styles, and tones. And I mean, the coloring by Frank D'Armata on all this stuff does help immensely, because it gives the same consistency to the art and flesh tones and the way everything is rendered also. So it's pretty good. But it's more like early Stefan Segovia, like Miko Suyan, Stefan Segovia, like they're two artists that I feel like go together in their style more than, at least at this time in 2006, than Finch and Miko Suyan. Although they next to each other, they do look pretty similar. So it doesn't make for a huge jump. It's not like you're going from David Finch to Humberto Ramos in one issue, right? That'd be a huge stylistic change in terms of artwork, storytelling, the whole thing. So the way that they do it here, I got to commend it to the editor for picking the right artist to pick up from Finch whenever he left the book. So pretty good showing. So this all takes place around the time of Civil War, like the last issue here. This is listed as number 13. I thought it was an annual, but maybe not. It's basically Moon Knight registering with the superhero initiative after the events of Civil War. And you have a couple of issues here where you'll have, like I think the single issues when they were originally published had casualties of war. I don't remember if Civil War was over or was ending, but it's basically like this other, it wasn't a tie-in to the event, it was an afterthought kind of thing. Like, hey, there are events of Civil War kind of tying into this book. And really that's couched by an appearance by Captain America saying, I don't like you, stay the fuck out of my way. An appearance by the Punisher telling Mark Spector not to get on the wrong side of it, which is like, what side are you talking about? And he's like, whatever side I pick, don't get on the other side because I'll kill you. And then you have Tony Stark showing up at the end being like, hey, you really need to register. So that's what the last issue is this, basically it's a long conversation with Mark Spector and the psychiatrist who's trying to judge if he is fit to be registered, mentally stable and stuff like that. And what follows is what you think is like, because we haven't had all the different personalities in this book. This book is all Mark Spector. There's no Jake Lockley, there's no Stephen Grant. They're mentioned, but they're not actually used. There's no other personalities that come out until this 13th issue where you're like, oh man, this guy really is nuts. And then the twist at the end of the issue is he? Because even Khonshu speaks to this guy, and this guy freaks the fuck out and just gives Mark Spector his cards, like, just get away from me, good, just leave me alone, that kind of thing. So the twist on that is a pretty interesting one to say, like, who is Mark Spector? Is he crazy? How crazy is he? And that whole thing. So I gotta say, for being a book as old as it was, and I thought it was just gonna be a huge art fest, I gotta say Charlie Huston did a really amazing job with the story here across these 12 issues, these 2 arcs. I really had fun enjoying it. I read it all in one day very quickly, and I thought it was a fantastic, fantastic thing. So if you can find the old trade paperbacks, go find them out. I think you can still get this omnibus on Amazon if you search paperback omnibus. Look for the Panini Press thing at the bottom of the Amazon listing. I think it went for like 35 bucks, or it's 23 pounds or whatever. But look for that on Amazon if you're in the US. I think you can still get this. And then I gotta say the paper quality is fantastic. Huge, thick book, very heavy, very hefty. It doesn't feel like you're wasting your money like some of these other Marvel trades that are coming out now. So I gotta give it to Panini Press for shipping overseas on Amazon. Thanks, guys. Since Marvel won't publish this stuff and bring it back for the Moon Knight Bonanza we're having this month, they will. So gotta hand it to them. So I really like this book. So if you can seek out the old trades, or if you're gonna get the Huston Moon Knight Omnibus, or you're gonna get this version of the book, I think you're gonna have a great time with these first 13 issues. I really enjoyed reading them more than I thought I would, reading them a second time. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know down below what you thought of Moon Knight in the comments below, and we'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.